welcome back to the shed. Today I want to review arguably one of the most iconic books in the genre in Ray Bradbury's 1954 retro Hugo award-winning novel, Fahrenheit 451. So today I would like to provide an audiobook review of this wonderful novel that I received from a local library. So what I would like to do is provide a plot overview, talk to what I liked, what I didn't like, and I'll make some recommendations. But we won't be ranking it on our Hugo and Nebula award-winning shed ladder, where I've been ranking all these wonderful novels. And that is because the Hugo Awards initially were supposed to be a one-off, with Alfred Bester winning the first inaugural Hugo Award in 1953. It wasn't until 1955 that they were reinstated and all those wonderful novels we have on the ladder started to come through. So at some point, this was awarded a retro Hugo for that missing year 1954, and what a wonderful novel it is. But we won't be ranking it because we've covered a couple, I think it's 3 or 4 retro award-winning Hugo novels now on this channel, and I haven't ranked those, so I won't be ranking today's one either. So the novel tells the story of this Guy Montag, and Guy is a fireman in this dystopian future where all homes are fireproof. But the firemen have a different role now in society, and that is to start fires. In particular, they hunt down individuals who own books, literature like my books behind me here, and burn down books. That's their primary job. So in this dystopian future, it's really outlawed to own any books or talk about books, and everyone's sort of watching these war television panels, and they're just transfixed in their own little worlds, and there's just no talk of books or tolerance for books at all. So what we find is that Guy Montag is one of these firemen, and he happens to encounter a new neighbour in this 17-year-old girl. And she's a wonderful personality, she's full of life, and she stops and smells the roses, and she just loves life. And she has these interactions, and Guy soon gets into a routine where he just cannot wait to meet up with this girl just to absorb some of her life. And she puts a question to him, and she basically says, hey, do you actually love anyone? Have you ever been in love? Are you happy? And Guy sort of looks at her and he's sort of thinking, well, yeah, of course I'm happy. Everyone's happy in this future that we have. But then he really starts to question himself, and he soon starts to realize that he doesn't really even know his wife. He can't even recall when he met her. And he starts to find a deep and ugly inner self where he really is not happy. So in time, we find that Guy is being called to a job where he has to set fire to this house. And one of the individuals there, the owner of all these books, stands proud and just would rather die with her books. And Montag, when confronted with that, which he had done many, many times before, but this conversation with this girl has ignited some kind of conflict within himself. So when he finds this woman just standing strong and holding on to her books and rather be, torched alive and die with her books as to live without them, it really starts this spiral in Guy Montag to really understand, why is he so disillusioned with life? What is there in books that would make a person rather sacrifice a life to them, or instead of living without them? So he starts to think there must be something to these books. Books must be the reason for their happiness. It must be the reason for my lack of happiness, and there must be something there. And this kind of dialogue gets him into conflict with his wife, with his chief of staff in the firemen, the chief of the firemen. So this internal self-assessment of Montag leads him to exile and to ultimately the ending of the novel, which I thought was just absolutely fantastic. So what is there to like about Fahrenheit 451? For the audiobook itself, I would have to say I love the narration. So the version I got was actually narrated by Ray Bradbury himself. And I thought that was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, how great was it to listen to the author of this wonderful novel expressing himself exactly the way the characters were intended to be expressed. So I just love that. I love the way Ray Bradbury told the story, and there was no miscommunication, there was no misinterpretation. This was exactly what the author meant to say and how he said it, and there was no confusion there. And I thought that was wonderful. One of my favorite audiobooks, this one. But the story itself has got so much to like as well. I mean, I love the picture of this dystopian future that Ray Bradbury painted. And sometimes it comes so frightening close to home. There's a particular passage, there's a quote in Fahrenheit 451, when the chief of the firemen basically says how they've got to this state where books are being burnt and people being burnt alive with them. And it says that, and I love that passage because it says that books were becoming so abridged, so cut down and chopped down just to maintain our attention span. So these wonderful works of Shakespeare that I have behind us, were condensed and abridged to a point where you can consume them in 15 minutes. And it just made me wonder, like with this, the social media that we have today and the constant challenge to get our attention span down to these 60-second, 30-second, 25-second clips, 15-second clips. And it just had me wondering, like, are we really wandering down the same path where we're just no longer reading these wonderful works of fiction and science fiction and just literature and non-fiction as well, and we're just condensing them into 2-second bites that we can consume. So that really resonated with me, that piece, and more so today than when I first read this novel 30-40 years ago. So look, for me, it really is a classic of the genre, a classic of literature in general, that I think you ought to read at least once if you haven't. But there are some things that, that you can nitpick on this one as well. So what is there not to like in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451? Look, I'd have to say that the big one that stood out for me is the inconsistencies in technology. One of the things that I couldn't really understand is that we have these mechanical hounds that are chasing these people down, and they seem to be like robots with artificial intelligence, pretty intelligent like creatures, right, these robots. And I just didn't understand, if all literature and all reading was banned, how that knowledge would be passed on. How would society maintain that level of technology? Also with what happened with Montag's wife Mildred, when she had that endoscope and that surgery performed on her to get her out of her overdose. I thought, well, how is that maintained, that level of technology, right? This is pretty advanced levels of technologies, and I didn't quite understand how that could be maintained, and it wasn't really explained quite satisfactorily, at least for me. The other thing that I would say is that this novel started off as a short story. At the back of the audiobook that I listened to, there's an actual interview with Ray Bradbury, which I thought was very interesting as well. But he actually mentions in that interview that this book started off as a short story, which later turned into a novella, and he was ultimately encouraged to make it into a novel. And I think that's led itself to a bit of an issue when it comes to the character development. I thought the characters weren't extraordinarily well developed, and they read more like what you'd expect to see in a short story at times. There's not a whole lot of backstory or a whole lot of understanding or any real character arc in these journeys. Although obviously Guy Montag goes for a huge character arc, but it can't be said of the other characters. I think some of the characters are a bit shallow, but look, that's just an observation and a very minor nitpick, because I actually did really thoroughly enjoy the characters as well. So when it comes to recommendations, I can't recommend this one enough. It is a wonderful novel, one that if we were to rank on our sci-fi shed ladder will most definitely reside on the A side somewhere. So if you like your dystopian futures, books like 1981, books like Earth Abides, I think you won't be disappointed. It's an absolute classic in a genre. Other books that come to mind, The City and the City by China Miéville, a different kind of novel, but I think you will see similarities there, as well as Paolo Bacigalupi's The Wind-Up Girl. Look, wonderful novel, Fahrenheit 451. And when it comes to rankings, I gave it a good 4 to 4.5 out of 5 on Goodreads. It's a classic that I hope you get a chance to read one day, because I'd love to hear your comments on it. Have you read Fahrenheit 451? Have you heard the audiobook narrated by Ray Bradbury? I'd love to hear your comments, because I thought it was a wonderful audiobook. And as a last recommendation, if you're going to go on a road trip and you're looking to spend a fair bit of time in a car and you want something to keep your mind occupied as you do so, I can't recommend this audiobook enough. Hey, I've been Peter, this has been The Shed, and I'll see you next time in The Shed.